What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma if you're new here, and I'd love to talk about all things Peloton cycling and fitness. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I post every single Sunday. And today is another Peloton Memoir review. Yes, the Susie Chan memoir was so great that it got me back onto the Peloton memoir grind. And man, oh man, was this one a interesting one, I guess. I was very motivational. Today, I'm going to be reviewing and summarizing Activate Your Greatness by Alex Toussaint. And I will say I am a Alex fan. Like, I'm not diehard. He's not my absolute favorite instructor, but I do like him on the bike. I do love a Club Bangers ride. I know he has always leaned like very motivational, but honestly, I don't mind that on the bike. Like, if someone's screaming that I can do it, it makes me feel like I can do it. So this one was always on my list to read since it came out. It came out almost 2 years ago in October of 2023. But I finally got around to giving it a listen on audiobook. Alex does narrate it, which is pretty typical for a memoir, but it's always a nice touch to actually hear about his story from him. And overall, he does have an interesting story. But I will say, especially coming off of Susie's book, it is just so motivational, like so much motivational speak. I would say around the first half, trying to be fair here, it's pretty 50-50 between like telling about his life story and how he got to Peloton, and then just being like, you know, Jarek motivational speak about like rising and grinding and like never giving up and always putting your best foot forward. But then the second half of the book, I would say leans 20% talk about like, you know, his time at Peloton, and then 80% motivational. So if you do not like motivational speak, this one is probably not for you. I'm honestly surprised because on Goodreads, it has a 4.08 rating, which I think is quite high. There are only 3,000 ratings, so not that many people read this book, but to be fair, not many people read and rate like a lot of the Peloton memoirs. So you obviously have a subset that really likes it, that read this book and really likes the book. To me, I would give this like a 2.5 to 3 out of 5 stars. I really appreciated hearing about his life story, and he has a very interesting one, but the motivational book talk does not inspire me that much. But I think overall it's pretty inspirational to just hear about his story. I am not gonna like dive into all of his motivational things. If you're interested in that, I suggest just reading the book or just taking one of his classes. Like, he doesn't thank a ghostwriter in the acknowledgement. I assume he does have one, but it also just kind of feels like he was just word vomiting the motivational stuff, in my opinion. Like, it just sounds like it came straight out of one of his classes. So I don't think that is anything particularly special. To add on to that, all the chapters are just named like generic motivational things like feel good, stop existing, start living. And I didn't think that this memoir was like hard to follow at all. It is pretty like chronological in order. And yeah, I feel like he doesn't have like kind of overarching things. Like, I feel like sometimes in some other Peloton books, it's confusing, like if they have cancer, like when exactly they had cancer and when they were diagnosed in terms of other things happening in his life. But I feel like his life is like fairly straightforward and easy to follow, at least the way that it was written out. So I can appreciate that. But basically, we start off the book. It is his childhood, and as a child, he was like the problem child. He got kicked out of so many schools. He got kicked out of preschool, elementary school. It's kind of unclear like why he was getting kicked out. I guess he was just a troublemaker, but yeah, I feel like to get kicked out of preschool, you like kind of have to be bad. But this leads up to his dad enrolling him in military school when he is 12. And he has always had a bad relationship with his dad. I feel like even as someone that casually takes him on Peloton, I knew a lot of this information. Like, I feel like he's pretty open about it. But yeah, like this was obviously a very hard adjustment. I think most people go to military school in high school, but he was very, very young. He hated his dad so much for doing this, and his dad felt like he had to do this because Alex was like going down this wrong path of like getting kicked out of all of these schools. The only thing that was like semi confusing to me is his dad also had cancer, and it was kind of unclear like when he was diagnosed, definitely before Alex went to military school, and that this like also caused problems, that the mom had to become the breadwinner while the dad was sick and like getting treatment, and that this was like a really big family adjustment. So like that was also happening. And yeah, I can't imagine like, you know, dealing with cancer, dealing with the mom being a breadwinner, and then your son is just like constantly getting kicked out of schools. But yeah, I'm also sure that going to military school at 12 was really, really hard and traumatic. So he goes to military school. He doesn't see his family a lot, which is sad. And he definitely learns a lot of discipline during this time. He still is kind of a troublemaker and he pushes the limits, but he does comment that he never got into any legal trouble and that like some of the people that he hung out with did. But like, yeah, essentially, he's very happy he didn't get into legal trouble. Like, he credits this to part of the reason why he's successful now. And, like, having that clean record was super, super important. And part of the reason why he has that clean record is because his parents sent him to military school. At this time, he also talks about, like, some people outside of the family that was really looking out for him. And he's basically just like, I don't even know why they're looking out for him. He credits his guidance counselor who, like, you know, helped him not get in trouble, really kept him on the straight and narrow. And then he also talks about his friend Jerome, who comes up a lot. And basically Jerome was like a big brother to him. He really helped him out. He like let him stay with him sometimes. Jerome's parents like came to Alex's sports games, like just very integrated into the family, and he knew he could always turn to Jerome. And yeah, credits to like having that support system to really helping him through these hard times. Eventually, he does push the envelope so much that he also gets kicked out of military school, which I cannot even imagine. It was after his grandfather's death that I think it just made him act out. But again, still no legal trouble. Then he talks about having this property in East Hampton. So I'm pretty sure they went to school in East Hamptons after he got kicked out of military school. This is the only time that I was a little confused about the timeline. But essentially, the schools were better in East Hampton, so they had some property that they were like not living in, but they could use it to go to the schools. And that they did go there because they were better schools. But the problem there was that it was like 99% white kids. And obviously, he is African American. And although you can adjust to that well as a kid, it's like, also, they're all different than you, and he definitely felt that. But Jerome was also there, so at least he had like some support system. Once high school was over, he applied and got into college, and basically like everybody was surprised that he got into college. He went for audio and video, and the first year it went really well. He was like really interested in the subject, had a great time, but then in the second year, he started partying more. And then he started selling weed to support his habit of partying. And he's like, yeah, I was a horrible weed dealer because basically I would just smoke my supply. So at this point, Jerome started giving him money to be like, I'll give you money if you stop selling weed. But it was just like he could never get back onto the straight and narrow after that. He dropped out of college, which obviously caused like huge fights with his mom, mostly his dad though. And he was like very, very descriptive with the fights. I do feel like he was very, very honest about his relationship with his dad. So if you have a tough relationship with your dad, you might find it very like relatable and cathartic to read about. But this comes all to a head one Thanksgiving where Alex is like, you owe me money because I like fixed the car or something. And then the dad is like, basically, if you make me pay this back, you're kicked out of the house. And Alex is like, yeah, pay me back. So then he gets kicked out and he starts living with Jerome. And I feel like this is kind of the turning point for Alex. At this point, like he needs a job. So he gets a job at Flywheel as a janitor in the Hamptons. And I feel like he talks about this a lot in his cycling classes, but he essentially like works his way up from here. So this is the step in the door. It's kind of interesting because at the time, like based on everything he's telling you, you think he's kind of gonna flub this job because he doesn't seem to be taking anything seriously. But he actually takes this very seriously and gets very good at it. And he says that it's very rewarding to come in and do a good job. Like, I feel like this is one of the first times in his life where he's like really locked in and trying hard. And he talks about like, oh, seeing the regulars and like setting up their bike correctly, and that it just feels really good to put your best foot forward, even though this is obviously not a job that he wants to do forever, that this is like the first time that he found it satisfying to work. He also mentions that he gets a second job at selling clothes at Lululemon. He says that there is a lot of client crossover, which does make sense, but you can tell that he's really grinding during this time. And then at some point he's like, hey, I think that I could teach these classes as well, which is pretty crazy. Like, when he was telling people, they really didn't think that he could do it. But I guess at this point, Flywheel is still pretty small. So he actually knows a CEO, Ruth, and she is a main character in his life. She pops up a lot too. And it's just like, hey, like, I want to become an instructor. And she's like, all right, sounds good. Let's do it. So he auditions, he passes the audition, he gets trained. He talks about how he has a unique point of view because he's a Black straight man. And he also talks about like the early hype of cycling classes. And I feel like I was not part of this early hype yet. Like, we're thinking this is around like, 2010. And that the classes are just selling out immediately, that, every single seat is filled. I just think of like, like the high days of SoulCycle where people are just absolutely obsessed. And he sold out his entire first spin class and then cleaned all the bikes afterwards. He still stayed as a janitor for 2 months and worked 80 hours doing both. He taught 15 classes a week, which was the max. And he also was still being a janitor. But then at some point it was so popular that he started teaching 25 classes a week, which, wow, that's a lot of cycling classes to teach, and was commuting into the city. So he's like splitting his time between East Hampton and the city. He then moves to the city completely. He lives in Bushwick, continues teaching classes. He talks about flying to Dubai to help set up the Flywheel studio there, and like talks about how this was like a huge step and how someone trusted him with something that's so important. And right about here is where the CEO, Ruth, gets him connected to people at Peloton right when they're starting up. And although Alex is obviously this hotshot Flywheel instructor, she really encourages him to go with the Peloton people and is basically like, yeah, I think that, there's really a future here. Which, first off, that's crazy that she's looking out for his best interest. Like, that's really nice of her. And then also, this woman just has like crazy business sense, because she started Flywheel and SoulCycle and then looked at Peloton and was like, yeah, Peloton is also a great step. For a while, Alex was like really hesitant to join Peloton because obviously he had a really good thing going at Flywheel, but he eventually accepted. He did have a 3-month non-compete, which is also crazy that you have a non-compete as a cycling instructor. And he talked about how like he didn't like the break, that he always wanted to keep moving, and that he mostly used that 3-month break to watch cycling classes that are from Peloton to like understand the cameras and to like perfect his craft. And this actually really reminded me of Cody Rigsby's memoir, because Cody also talks about like taking the classes really seriously, taking notes, figuring out like what worked, what didn't. And it is just crazy because their classes feel so effortless, but they're both saying like, yeah, we put in like a ton of work to make them seem effortless, make them seem cool, funny, which does make sense that they're not just like naturally super good at doing cycling classes. But I do appreciate that they talk about it being hard work, and that, yeah, like they work hard to come out with good content. He also talks about, again, how he is the first Black instructor at Peloton. So like right when he joins, he's the only Black instructor. So again, offering that unique point of view. He also talks about meeting Christine Durkle for training. And he's basically like, yeah, I don't need training. And she's like, you probably do. And then he's like, nah, let me audition for you. So he auditions for her and she's like, all right, like you don't need training, which I thought that was really funny. I like can't imagine Christine saying that. Like, she's so serious to me. And he also comments that later on he kind of regrets coming in so hot-headed, that there is still a lot to learn. So now he's been at Peloton. Peloton's getting a little bit of traction. His classes are going really well. And then one random day, his dad calls him and tells him he's proud of him, that he saw an article in the New York Times about Peloton where Alex was cited. And this is a really, really big moment for Alex. He didn't realize that pretty much his whole life he was just waiting for his dad to tell him that he was proud of him. It kind of goes back, and it's a reoccurring theme in this book about his difficult relationship with his dad, but that he realized that when his dad told him that, he felt like he was always waiting for it, but there was always other people that were always in his corner and always supporting him. So yeah, he was just basically before that call, he was feeling good and looking good, but now he wants to help others. And yeah, this is just where it really, really turns to motivational talk, how he wants to help support others and how this entire situation with his dad got him to be more open on the bike, which I never really thought of Alex as being super open on the bike, but now that I think about it, he is, especially compared to other instructors. Even compared to Susie Chan's memoir, it's I didn't know any of that about her, and I knew most of this stuff about Alex just by casually taking his classes. So he actually does share a lot of information throughout his classes about himself. At this point, Peloton's really, really taking off. The classes are growing, hiring more instructors. Alex is traveling a lot. He bought his first car. He's living in Hudson Yards, which is bougie New York City, Manhattan. He's obviously making very good money. I would just love to see the Peloton instructor paychecks, but we know we will never see those, but I am very curious. And then his grandmother died in 2018, and that made him really pause and evaluate his life. He said this is the first time that he showed real vulnerability in his classes, and that he actually cried talking about his grandma dying. And then after that class, he got so much support, especially from other men being yeah, we love seeing the vulnerability, especially because men aren't typically, showing that kind of vulnerability. And then he also talks about going to Haiti for his grandmother's funeral, which was interesting. It was the first time that he had been to Haiti in a really long time, and talking to all of his cousins. Then we kind of skip forward to the pandemic, where he's talking about streaming from his apartment, the live at home classes. And wow, what a time that would be. That's when I joined Peloton. So it's just so crazy to think about the pandemic and the isolation and the fact that the instructors were just casually streaming from their apartments. He said he was the first instructor to do a live at home class, and that during it, the music cut out, but only for him. And it was kind of a mess. And he could have just stopped there, but instead he basically just kept going without the music. The people in the class could hear it, just he couldn't. And how, yeah, he pushed through that. He had an excuse to stop, but he didn't stop. And that he really wanted this to be successful, to connect with people during these unprecedented times. Then he briefly mentions some other instructors. I love when there's cameos from some other instructors, so it's always interesting to me. He didn't dwell on it a lot, but he basically just says that yeah, the "Together We Go Far" slogan from Peloton is very meaningful for him. It doesn't matter if he's doing well, he wants the whole squad to do well. And that Robin really taught him this. Then he skips forward a little bit again. He talks about preparing the Last Dance Peloton ride, which is the Michael Jordan show on Netflix. He did a ride to sum it up, and how he was so grateful to be asked, how he took it so seriously, and that this was a huge career highlight for him. And then pretty much right after that, the George Floyd murder happened, and how this was a huge shifting point for him. And he talks about BLM. I actually think that this is the most interesting part of the book, and talks about a lot of his own experiences, getting pulled over in Brooklyn and literally the cops just being we pulled you over because you look like a drug dealer. I feel I've read a lot of books from African-American women, but not actually from African-American men. So it was very interesting to hear his perspective, and that this moment he realized that he was not helping the African American community at all, and that this was a huge part missing from him in his like doing it better slogan. And that, yeah, like basically he is like the token Black guy, but that he needs to make a better effort to lift other African Americans up. So he actually spends a lot of time talking about this. First, he talks about how he started wearing his do-rag to work and like sweats instead of trying to fit in with like white culture, that he was embracing his own and like showing he's still the same guy. He's just, not dressed to fit into the white culture. He talks about participating in Blackout Tuesday, which was just posting like a black square onto your Instagram feed, and how afterwards he's like, this was actually meaningless, like you actually need to do action. So then he groups two things together. First, he goes on Instagram Live and basically like talks about his experience as a Black man and how people need to be more accepting. And then he also does a Peloton class where he talks about this and like makes a plea for people to be more accepting. He does say like, oh, I realize that I might be the only Black man that some people let into their homes. And that, he reaches like a ton of people on the platform. So he needs to try to make them more accepting. And after this class, he gets a lot of positive feedback, but he also gets some negative feedback of people being so angry that they're writing the CEO of Peloton, John, to fire Alex, which is just so crazy. Like, I cannot imagine being that hateful that this is like, you need to fire Alex. But John is basically like, no. So obviously this has really stirred up a lot of drama. So at this point, the New York Times get involved. The New York Times asks John, the CEO, like, did Alex break any, political rules on Peloton that like, you're not supposed to talk about politics? And John is basically like, this is not a political issue. This is like a human rights issue. And no, he didn't break any rules. So it's really nice that Peloton supported that. And we know that Peloton supported it. Like, they've donated money to BLM. I've also read Tunde's memoir where she talks about her experience and like also doing similar rides on Peloton. And Alex said he does not regret it at all, but it definitely like shifted his focus and reputation at Peloton. Before that, it was like, everybody loves Alex. He's such a nice guy. And now people are like, oh, like, he is associated with this movement, but that he does not regret it at all. He also talks about like basketball players being a really good role model for him in this space. He specifically mentions LeBron and how like LeBron is a really big like supporter and activist for BLM, and that essentially he wants to be the LeBron of cycling classes. From here, he kind of shifts into just like random stories to wrap up the book. So he talks about hiring his friends to help him with endorsements. So essentially he's like, people say you shouldn't mix business and friendship, but like basically his friends are also really smart. Like, they had the like correct degrees to do this, and that he wanted to be like LeBron. He wants to lift other people that are like him. And basically he has this like do better brand. He talks about like trying to align with other brands that like are good brands essentially. And he talks about negotiating with Nike, but that didn't work out. Eventually Nike like gave him a contract, but they essentially kept trying to like change the language. Love to know more details about that, but I'm sure there's like, NDAs, and eventually that he signs a contract with Puma instead and has his like own line with Puma for women's and men's and shoes, which I did not know that at all. I have not taken an Alex class in a while, so I don't know if he talks about that in the classes, but I thought that was pretty interesting. And then he talks about buying his first house in New Jersey and that there's room for the family, and like calling his mom up, telling his mom that she can retire and come live with him, and like that's one of the best feelings in his life. I can't imagine, like, I'm sure that does feel very good to be able to call your parents up and be like, yeah, like you don't have to work anymore. And then he finishes it off talking about playing at a NBA celebrity game, so that he like always wanted to do this, that he always liked basketball growing up, and like he knew that he would never be in the NBA, but once he kind of had a platform on Peloton, he was really interested in this celebrity game. And he wrote a speech before he got to the game because he knew he was going to be crowned MVP. Like, he didn't know, but he was like, I'm preparing for the best. And he booked a private jet home because he was like, I don't want to fly with a trophy through like public airlines. And then he actually did win, which is like absolutely crazy. He was MVP. Like that story is crazy. And I was also kind of surprised he's that good at basketball that he just got MVP. But also, like, how much money is this man making that he's just booking private jets to fly with his trophy home? But yeah, after that, obviously his dad congratulated him again. And yeah, that he feels like he has a good relationship with his dad now. I feel like it's still a little strained, but yeah, that has been repaired a lot since he's been a kid. And that is pretty much the book. Kind of a wild ride. I thought it was pretty interesting. My favorite parts were probably after he got to Peloton. I really liked hearing about like his experience with BLM, and then like the random stories were funny. I mean, the NBA celebrity game was very funny in my opinion. And yeah, it was cool. It wasn't super like crazy or anything super deep. I feel like the most like insider knowledge we got was that he had a non-compete with Flywheel, which I do think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't think he's dishing any of the tea, but he does have an interesting life. He obviously has a very good attitude going into life. And if you like motivational speak, then you will definitely really like this book. If you don't, I think you could probably skip it. But overall, I thought it was a fun listen. It's a pretty quick listen, especially if you listen to it on 1.5 times speed like I do. I think it was only around 4 hours. So overall, a decent way to spend my time. But let me know if you've listened to this, if so, what you think, and if there's any other Peloton memoirs I should check out. The only other one I've been eyeing up is Sam Yo's, because you know Sam Yo does have a special place in my heart, and he was a monk, so I feel like he should have an interesting memoir. But that is it for this video. I hope you guys are staying safe, having an awesome week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!